this second and concluding part of the two-part series on Indian musical instruments, Professor Anurag Gupta talks about the Ektantri Veena. It's a single-stringed instrument which has been found on various iconographic representations of the past. So, based on his researches into texts of the period as well as representations on coins, in sculpture, Professor Gupta has been able to understand the various relationships between the components of the Ektantri Veena and evolved a design based on that. So he's actually reconstructing the Ektantri Veena based on these evidence, this kind of evidence. Now, he mentions one important aspect. Of course, there are several important aspects, but one of them especially, which is unique to the Indian stringed instrument, is the jiva, which is a piece of thread or other ductile material placed under the string and over a bridge, and which helps to produce beats and what you would call as a harmonic cloud, which is very characteristic of our Tanpura, for example. And Professor Gupta also speaks to us about the tuila, which is still played in some of the remote parts of Jharkhand, as well as in countries such as Myanmar and Thailand in different forms. So let's listen to Professor Gupta in a theory of strings. Would you be able to speculate on the timbres of these instruments as well as the kind of tuning that may have been involved in the Ektantri Veena?
So my work on Ektantri Veena started much late. So I started first working on the modeling aspects, and this work started, as I told you, after I taught this course here in Kanpur. So formally it started around 2014 or so, and it has been moving slowly, very slowly, I would say. And the Ektantri Veena, I got interested because of my tabla work, percussion instrument work, I started looking into the historicity of tabla design. Then when did people first started talking about patch, this syahi? And again, as I told you, it goes all the way to Natya Shastra, very interesting things there. So there, when I in that process, I started collecting a lot of musicology texts. I started seeing a whole tradition of musicology texts from Natya Shastra, and then, Sangeet Ratnakar, Datilam, Bradeshi. So I came across a whole lot of texts. Many of them already had a critical editions prepared by organizations like this Baroda's Oriental Institute or Bhandarkar, for example. So those were helpful. So I started getting exposed to these texts where musical instruments were described. Usually these are texts on aesthetics broadly, like Natya Shastra, and usually very broad. But what I found fascinating, that these texts would always have a couple of chapters on musical instruments. All these texts, whether you take Sangeet Ratnakar, Natya Shastra, Datilam, all these texts have significant, whether we have them with us or not is a different matter. Unfortunately, texts like Datilam and Bradeshi, which are very important because they kind of bridge the gap between Natya Shastra and Sangeet Ratnakar. There is a big gap actually. Natya Shastra is like around a few hundred BC, and Sangeet Ratnakar is much later. Yeah. 13th century or so on. So in between, Datilam and Bradeshi are in between. But unfortunately, and their critical editions are available with us. They have been translated extremely well. Unfortunately, their musical instrument chapters are lost. So that is something that I hope one day we can find them, because there is a lot of information that we don't know of what happened in between these two things. So that is what started to happen. And as I was doing that, I got interested in other instruments also, and there I came across a work. But so there was a very famous musicologist from BHU, Premlata Sharma. I don't know if you've heard her
One
name.
I've
She has
heard of
done.
it. Yes.
She's done actually Bradeshi. She has prepared the critical edition of Bradeshi. Also got it translated. The translations of the English translations of Sangeet Ratnakar. Unfortunately, only the first two volumes. Very, I mean, amazing translations are by her. So she has done a huge amount of work around music per se. Also, a very good performer in her own right. So I found a small article by Premlata Sharma and one of her students in a conference proceeding on Ektantri Veena. Of course, it was very crude. Unfortunately, it was just a couple of pages. It mentioned that Sangeet Ratnakar has very detailed information of Ektantri. And that got me into Ektantri. I thought, well, I mean, by this time I was already starting to look at Tanpura. And Tanpura, so I have a small paper on Tanpura. I think I have sent you that. And Tanpura was, I mean, it is still an instrument which fascinates me more than any other Indian instrument. And there again, I was trying to understand the origin of the curved bridge, the origin of the jiva, this thread that we have, this for we on the bridge. So many design features of Tanpura. I was perplexed that where are these coming from? I was looking at other world cultures. I was hardly finding these features in other instruments in the world. So I was very curious to know where these things are coming from. And again, our literature is quite silent. I mean, like you have to really search a lot, and even then, you're most likely to be misinformed rather than be informed about these things. For example, if you just try to find out what is the oldest description of a curved bridge that you can find, or what is the oldest description of a jiva, of a thread that you can find. I mean, you will not find these answers precisely in like any text, and that got me to Ektantri Veena. So Ektantri Veena is, in my readings, is the oldest description. So the oldest description of Ektantri Veena is in Manasolas. So Manasolas is a fascinating text. It is a text around 11th century or 12th, early 12th century, I think. And it is a fantastic text because Manasolas is a treatise. It is a treatise for the training of princes, and that how a prince should be trained in various arts. So it has chapters, big chapters on architecture, big chapters on art of war. It has big chapters on music, aesthetics, and of course, good chapters on musical instruments also. So that is the first place where Ektantri Veena is described. It is only in Sangeet Ratnakar where Ektantri is described in detail. And that is what we also used for our work. We studied Sangeet Ratnakar's description very carefully. What was a bit of hindrance to us that those chapters on musical instruments in Sangeet Ratnakar, they have not been translated in English. They have been translated in at least 2 Indian languages. So Sangeet Ratnakar, if you try to get English translation of Sangeet Ratnakar, there is a partial translation by Premlata Sharma, which is very good. Unfortunately, the student who was translating Sangeet Ratnakar in English, Premlata Sharma ji student, he passed away very early on. So they could not follow it. But there is a very good translation in Marathi, and there is a very good translation in Hindi also. I don't know if there is translation in any southern language.
Kannada there is, but I think, as you said, partial translations. I think 1 or 2 chapters.
Right. So people have.
Satyanarayana.
Okay, Satyanarayana. Yeah, I've heard. I've heard. Yeah. Actually, a lot of interest in Sangeet Ratnakar has been in its music theory chapters. People or dance chapters also. I mean, there is so the last part of Sangeet Ratnakar is on dance. So that also has generated interest. I have not found a lot of interest in the music. I mean, it's a 3rd volume in some sense. I mean, in the 3rd volume for the Adyar editions. So that 3rd volume, I did not find much interest like among scholars. So that was a bit of impediment because I had no formal training in Sanskrit either. So I had to work with Sanskrit scholars. But I was fortunate to find someone or the other, and that is where that journey started. And this was around 2016, 2017 that I started to look for material around Ektantri Veena, and there were two things that I was looking for. I was looking for texts, and I found several texts, starting from Manas Ullas to texts up till 17th century and so on.
Kumbai you mentioned, right?
Exactly. So I went. So I found 5 to 6 texts. I mean, there were more, but they were kind of repeating the information.